Hey guys, what is up? Sam or Scorpio here. Today I have for you guys a very exciting video on the future of Call of Duty, talking about the potential for a massive, large-scale Avengers-style crossover between the Modern Warfare and Black Ops series. We're going to be going over everything we know about this upcoming crossover, when it's going to be coming, what it's going to entail, and a whole lot more. This is actually going to be a dual commentary with DK Dynamite. If you already don't know who he is, then I'll be sure to link his channel down below so you can check him out. And without further ado, we're just going to hop right into the discussion. So our first hints of the worlds of Black Ops and Modern Warfare colliding actually came last year, when Call of Duty Modern Warfare was initially first announced, and when the pre-orders dropped, as a pre-order bonus, if you pre-ordered the game, you would get Captain Price in Blackout. This was super weird at the time, since we'd never seen anything like this before, and there were no teasers or hints to any kind of crossovers, and all of a sudden, here he is alongside Mason, Woods, and the whole Black Ops gang.
Now here's something I learned just a couple of days ago. So in the Spec Ops intro cutscene, we actually learned that Verdansk has a mysterious history dating back to the Cold War.
This place was nice once.
Well, it's not anymore.
East and West rebuilt Verdansk after the Cold War.
Like you didn't like that cooperation.
So Verdansk ended up getting destroyed during that period and was eventually rebuilt by the Russians. So that's a really interesting link that could really establish a connection between Black Ops Cold War, the presumed title for Call of Duty 2020, and Modern Warfare's Battle Royale. So with that being said, right, the actual storyline of Black Ops Cold War could go in all types of directions with the Russians, with Vietnam, and then maybe we'll get a hint of Verdansk towards the end, which does bridge the gap between both series very nicely. Now, it's a bit unfortunate that the community has overlooked this detail in Spec Ops, considering how awful the mode actually is, but with that being said, there is a good chunk of story that you could take out of Spec Ops, which I do believe Infinity Ward is going to be recapping before the release of Season 4.
So in order to actually catch up the players who are just playing Warzone and the free-to-play elements of the game and didn't actually have access to the campaign and Spec Ops, Infinity Ward are actually going to be trying to catch up all those players on all the story that did precede this events. So for example, a way they're going to be doing this is through a brand new intel system that will be coming with the launch of Season 4, where you will be able to go around the map and pick up pieces of intel. Much as we're used to for campaigns, these will include voice recordings from various characters and all sorts of hidden messages that will further and explore this mystery of Verdansk.
Now, what I heard recently from verified insiders is that there will be a section of the main menu for Call of Duty 2020 dedicated to Warzone. So I'm not sure if they're going to brand that as just Call of Duty Warzone and not Modern Warfare Warzone as we know right now. We know Warzone is its own application for the time being if you want to get it free to play, but I'm curious if they'll update the application over the next few months to where when you download Warzone on its own, it won't come with a lot of the Modern Warfare assets that are from multiplayer. You know, there are those free to play weekends every now and again that do come with not just Warzone, but a lot of assets and weapons and such for Modern Warfare multiplayer. So maybe when Call of Duty 2020 does come out, we'll see a Treyarch style update in Warzone, a Treyarch style map. Maybe we'll see Verdansk, but from the Cold War, right? Verdansk from the past. That would be absolutely insane. And then we would see a loot pool of Treyarch weapons, Treyarch characters, and anything that's fitting to that campaign. Then when Modern Warfare 2 comes out in 2021, the sequel to the new reboot, we'll once again get a Modern Warfare style update to the map of Verdansk with the same weapons we'll see in that game as well.
So one of the most confusing aspects with merging these two things together is actually what is going to happen with the loadout system, because right now you're simply picking from your Modern Warfare classes, but when we start to see Warzone linking into another game altogether, how do you handle that, since obviously you can't just have them picking from Modern Warfare classes if we're going to have a Black Ops themed map? I think the most logical way to do this is to totally separate Warzone off, make it its own entity where you make its own classes, and you could maybe pick from a mixture of old and modern weapons.
And as you guys also know, I made a video about this probably a good week ago. We actually learned from data miners that the Galil is coming to Modern Warfare, and what's weird about that is that it's an iconic Black Ops weapon that's never been in the Modern Warfare series before, and what are the odds that they add that in during Season 4, which is presumably around the time we see official marketing for Call of Duty 2020. Now, Sam, I know you did some research recently about where the Galil actually comes from, which is also really interesting news.
So an interesting thing about the Galil is while it was predominantly a weapon used back in the 20th century in the Cold War days, it is still in mild use today, but only by one army in the entire world, and that is Israel. I think this is very interesting because it is a very unknown weapon in modern times, it's not significant in any way, and Israel really isn't a significant faction within modern warfare, so this would actually allow them to put it in whilst actually still putting a modern twist on the weapon, whilst maintaining that link to a Black Ops styled name of an iconic weapon.
And don't get me wrong, there have been weapons in Modern Warfare that made their way into Black Ops, right? The FAMAS, the AUG, but maybe the tides have turned this time and we'll see some Black Ops weapons make their way into Modern Warfare with the release of Season 4.
As part of the many recent updates that have come to Modern Warfare that have brought in all sorts of new Easter eggs, updates and event teasers, there is actually a small swamp hut near the prison area of the map that has now been opened up. This hut was always there, but the doors to it have finally been opened, and it does have inside it some very interesting teasers. As we can see on this little table here, it does seem to show an RCXD prototype. This is again, much like we had with the Galil, an item that is very well known from Treyarch games, and we've seen it in basically all the Black Ops games in all sorts of different ways, but it's never been in a mainline Infinity Wars game before. And even more interestingly, if you get a sniper and look up very close on this weapon, it does actually have a May 115 date on it. So we really don't know what is going on here, since this world does seem to be a more realistic one, and yet they seem to be hinting at the existence of Element 115. So it is possible that they could plan to leave behind that realistic aspects down the line in favour of actually connecting in some of that more zombies and mystical kind of lore by allowing them to use what Element 115. We do know there is all sorts of mysterious properties to the gas within Warzone, where it does seem to be turning the tides and turning enemies against each other, so it does seem like that could actually be done with something like Element 115 or Nova Gas, two iconic things from Treyarch titles making their way into Modern Warfare Warzone.
So wait a second, Tag der Toten. I thought 115 was banished to the Dark Ether, but somehow slipped up and ended up at Verdansk. So I'm not sure how 115 will play a role in the upcoming Call of Duty, but we'll love to see its return nonetheless. I'm really curious if they could tie in the gas somehow, whether that's Nova 6, whether it's a form 115. I'm curious how they'll tie everything together, but there is also mention of sleeper agents in some recently released Warzone transmissions, and sleeper agents obviously play a role within the iconic Black Ops lore from Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, so I'm also curious if they're really trying to tell a bigger story here, a story that we may not understand until the release of Call of Duty 2020. Maybe they'll be tying everything back to Warzone eventually, right? You know, we'll get this grand story told over the next few Call of Duty games, and then all of it just gets, you know, weaved together very, very well. But here's the thing too, right? The Cold War, right, and presumably when the new Black Ops game takes place, and the new Modern Warfare will essentially be taking place 50 years apart, so nothing necessarily conflicts with one another. They can tell this whole ass arc in Black Ops 2020 that's essentially a prequel to the new Modern Warfare. So I think that's the best way to bridge the franchises together a little bit, right? You have a story being told in the past that serves as a prequel for what's being told in the present, you know, while nothing really affects one another, right? There won't be any major continuity errors or plot holes if the writing team at both Treyarch and Infinity Ward work together to tell one cohesive story.
So while it did seem at first like the bunkers within Warzone were a fairly standalone thing from a greater Call of Duty continuity, they were simply building towards furthering the Warzone storyline and seeing where that progresses to. However, it does seem like that is all actually going to be linking in to the Cold War and that brand new Black Ops reboot. An extremely reputable gaming news source, VGC News, have actually put out an article recently where they did tell us that their sources had been telling them that Modern Warfare's Warzone event was actually building towards Call of Duty 2020 teasers, and they were actually going to be using this to market the game, which obviously makes a ton of sense based on the massive demographic that Warzone actually has and the fact it allows them to get teasers and marketing funding out to the massive most amount of people that they possibly can, since after all, it really is the biggest platform they have right now. Interestingly enough, our main bunker within Warzone, Bunker 11, its name is actually of a very significant amount of importance, being that back in the Cold War, there was an iconic German bunker simply known as Government Bunker in English, and within that bunker it was in fact exactly 11 miles. This was actually built to protect government officials back in those days. So it's interesting here that they are referencing Cold War in many ways, and the technology within it does seem to be very old-fashioned. It doesn't look modern in any way. So it is very possible that they are building towards these bunkers having existed since the Black Ops days. And even with some brand new leaks towards where the Warzone storyline is progressing to, we know a future step of this storyline will be titled The Lost Team. While we don't currently know exactly who this Lost Team are, it's all very possible that it could be an army of soldiers going all the way back to the Cold War who have been hiding in these bunkers all along. We could very well see some of our iconic Black Ops characters all aged up in the modern setting.
Now, this leads me into something I brought up on stream just the other day. Imagine an Avengers level crossover in the Call of Duty franchise, right? And hear me out. The ending of a future release for either Black Ops or Modern Warfare could have a little cutscene showing the Black Ops crew meeting the Modern Warfare crew, right? And you're like, well, you just said that the Cold War is 50 years before the current events of Modern Warfare, and that's true. How this would work, right, is the reappearance of David Mason. Depending on how they handle the arcs of Mason and Woods in this Black Ops soft reboot will determine how David Mason could also be handled, right? Maybe we could see, a middle-aged David Mason in the present day, and he meets up with Price, Task Force 141. That's how they could tie everything together in the present, right? But imagine a crossover on that scale where maybe you have a Black Ops 1, 2, and 3 coming out, and then we'll have a Modern Warfare 2 and 3 coming out, over the next decade or so, and the anticipation, just imagine the hype, right? When we play the new Black Ops 3 or the new Modern Warfare 3, and at the end of one of those two games, right, we're anticipating this big meetup between some of our favorite characters, and then we eventually get a release of a new Call of Duty that might be co-developed by both Treyarch and Infinity Ward, where we have all the same characters and all the same maps in one game. How crazy would that be? I think this is probably what they might be building towards, considering they're crossing everything over already so soon with just Warzone alone. I cannot wait to see if a future Call of Duty does have a campaign where we see all of the characters work together for the entire story. And like I said earlier, Black Ops, as of right now, can remain in the past, not interfering with any of the threads going with Modern Warfare that is set in the present.
So as we currently know, Activision are wanting to follow a much more realistic approach with Call of Duty going forward. After Modern Warfare has really proved there is some huge demand for it. We likely won't even see another futuristic Call of Duty title with boost movement or even as far forward as Black Ops 2. It's very unlikely they're going to want to hop any further into the future than modern times, as long as the current formula of realistic titles continues to perform well.
Now imagine an old man Woods and a middle-aged David Mason hanging out with Captain Price and the Ghost of Verdansk, going over the story of Verdansk, how, Woods remembers it from back in the Cold War versus how Price is currently experiencing it with some new threats from Zakayev and Khaled al-Assad. Just imagine how crazy that crossover would be, but overall I think Activision does want to keep a realistic approach with the franchise going forward, but connecting everything into one universe, I think, is the best approach to really innovate the series in ways that haven't been done before, just to ensure that we don't get any more one-off releases like Advanced Warfare, Infinite Warfare, Ghost, so that we have one cohesive thread going forward for the future of the franchise. Now, what they could do as well is retcon certain things and tie in threads from Ghost, Infinite Warfare, Advanced Warfare. They could actually tie that in lightly with a bunch of retcons to make everything work going forward. But maybe you could thank the ending of Tag der Toten for closing off the multiverse and going into this new rebooted universe for the future of Call of Duty.
And I think with that, guys, that pretty nicely wraps up this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you have, make sure to smash a like to show your support. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you think a potential Modern Warfare Black Ops crossover could actually look like? And be sure to check out DK's channel, link down below. And yeah, like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you on more Call of Duty videos. Bye!